From first hunts to lifelong traditions, we're here to honor the heritage, hear the passion, and connect through the stories that make us all hunters. Grab your gear, find your stand, and listen in as we share another journey that shapes a hunter's legacy. This episode is brought to you by LogIQ Hunt, an app designed for the future of hunting, helping you prepare with purpose and pursue with precision. Here we go. To all our listeners here, welcome to episode number 1. I am Mitchell Fox. I'm going to be the host of this brand new podcast we're bringing to the market, A Hunter's Legacy. And the idea behind this podcast is, I know there's a lot of hunting podcasts out there, but what are we trying to do different? So if you look at what the plan is for A Hunter's Legacy, the goal is to bring on these everyday hunters. What I mean by that is not so much the famous hunters. We're talking just everyday, regular American hunters, just your average Joe, kind of, so to speak. And the goal behind that is, if you look at what I'm doing with LogIQ Hunt, which, if you haven't heard, is a new app I launched in August of 2024, so brand new. My goal with LogIQ Hunt is to make an app based on user feedback. That way we can gather feedback from your everyday average hunter and develop into a product that the average hunter wants to use. As I was thinking about ways to bring hunters together, share stories, get a better idea of what the average hunter is, that's kind of where I came up with the idea for this podcast. I know a lot of the shows we all watch and the podcasts we listen to, it's great hearing from these people we all know, the famous hunters. But at the same time, the life they're living around hunting isn't a reality for most hunters out there. And that's what we're trying to solve with this podcast. Now, you might be listening to episode number 1 and think, okay, we're just going to listen to this Joe Blow talk to himself for an hour or whatnot. But I promise you, this is going to be the only solo episode. And as I start recording episodes, and I do have a couple recorded that are going to start flowing in next week, we're going to focus on bringing in these average Joes that 99% of the listeners haven't heard of. And what we want to do is just bring reality to our listeners. Not all hunters have the same opportunity to hunt all the time. For example, I work full time. I am starting a company. That takes up a lot of my time. Now, as big of a bow hunter as I am, I might not get to hunt more than 5 or 6 times a year. And we just want to bring that to our listeners because I'm guessing a lot of our listeners are in the same boat, right? They can't hunt every day for 3 weeks straight. They might have a family. They might have a career. They might farm. We just want to bring real world situations to our listeners that's relatable. And what we're going to do is we're going to mix in some good stories, listen in on how people got started hunting, all that good stuff. This is going to be far from a podcast where we're trying to give you advice. We're trying to bring on experts to give you guys advice. This is primarily going to be a storytelling podcast, a podcast where we learn about the average American hunter and what drives their passion, how they got started hunting, all that good stuff. And the goal is just to make this extremely relatable to the average hunter. Without further ado, what we're going to do for this episode, I'm just going to introduce myself. We kind of talked a little bit about what the plan is for this podcast and who we're going to interview. Then we're going to do some storytelling, just because I'm going to be the one doing the interview questions from every episode from here on out. So what I want to do is just give the listeners a little bit of an opportunity to learn about myself, because as we go forward, that's not going to be the case. We're going to learn about most of these hunters you haven't heard of. So who am I? I grew up in north central Iowa, and you might think, okay, yeah, Iowa has big deer. There is big deer in Iowa, but where I hunt, it's flat as a pancake. I can run cameras every year, and I think the biggest deer I've ever had on camera is maybe 165. It's not the heart of Iowa where you think all the giant deer are. And it presents a lot of challenges because, like I said, it's flat. We are pretty fortunate to have some really good hunting ground up there for where we're at. And I've killed a couple of deer over mid 150s and whatnot. So pretty fortunate, but there's a lot of challenges because we're hunting river bottom. When you walk out to your tree stand, the timber is pretty small. there's not really a lot of good opportunity to walk out to your tree stands without being busted. The river bottoms are wide open, especially once the leaves fall. The timber I hunt primarily is 40 acres out in the middle of a wide open section. It's up on a little bit of a hill. There's no way to get out there without being seen. No draws, ridges to sneak behind. So that's where I grew up and that's where I hunted. In terms of career, I graduated from Iowa State in 2012 and started working in the seed industry doing research and development. Did that for 7 or 8 years. And I've always had a passion for ag technology. I was fortunate enough to get a job with Climate Field View, and I did that for 4 years, kind of like a sales support role. And it really gave me a great opportunity to learn about technology, data collection, and all that stuff. Work with growers, get familiar with how people use their software, what they like about it, what they don't. And that's kind of where it evolved into LogIQ Hunt, which, like I said, launched mid 2024. So my goal is to bring a lot of the stuff I learned from ag technology into hunting apps. As I said, I did that for 4 years and things didn't go right. They made some cuts and I didn't make it. And now what I'm doing is I'm doing a sales role for a company called Traction Ag. Traction Ag is accounting software for farmers, helping them keep better records, utilize their field records to match up with their accounting transactions and get a really accurate snapshot of how much they're making per acre. Now, you might listen to this and say, okay, well, you started LogIQ Hunt and why are you still working full time? Well, the reality of it is I love working with farmers. I love doing what I do. And I guess I'm just not ready to give that up yet. I have a lot of passion for farmers. I grew up on a farm, 3,000 head of feedlot cattle and a couple thousand acres of row crop. I'm not really involved with it anymore, but that's just kind of to give you a little idea of where my passion comes from farmers. Now, looking at the life of the entrepreneur, I started in probably 2023 and kind of started with the idea, worked on it for a year and a half before we even got it to market. Been working on it for a couple of years and we launched in August. And if you haven't used LogIQ, I highly recommend getting on it. Not because I'm trying to add new subscribers, but when you look at LogIQ Hunt and how we built it out, or how you build any software, compare it to building a house. You build a house, you get it framed up, and you maybe get it as far as you need to move in. But you do the minimum amount of work to move in. And from there, you live in it for a little bit, get some ideas of how you want to design it, how you want to do the layout and all that good stuff, and kind of build it as you go. Think of software as the same way. We built this minimum viable product where you can see landowner information, get some good weather details and all that good stuff. Just real basic, minimum features, enough to get users in there. Now we're going to rely on user feedback to kind of build it from here. And right now the price is set at $9.99 a year for the foreseeable future. And the reason we're offering it so cheap for nationwide parcel data and a 15-day forecast is we want to bring users in and start using our software and help guide us on what we want to build in the future. I'm running LogIQ Hunt by myself. I want to build it based on user feedback and not what I want to see. This is going to be an app built by you guys as we kind of go forward. So that's why it's real basic. We have a lot of stuff in the pipeline based off user feedback, but the more people that can get in there and provide us some guidance on what they want to see, the more it's going to help us bring a product that's a better fit for all you hunters. Now, that's a little bit about my career, my life, real basic. I won't go into too many details and bore you all. But as I talked about LogIQ Hunt being built in the future based off user feedback, I'm talking just everyday American hunters. That's why this podcast evolved into bringing on just your average Joes, because a lot of them probably don't want to be in the spotlight. A lot of them, or most of them, probably haven't even done a podcast before. So why not bring those people on and just learn a little bit about them? Everybody has a story to tell. Everybody has a different way of how they got started hunting. So that's what I want to bring to our listeners. And by listeners, I mean probably the 6 listeners we have for the first episode. But as we evolve, I want to give listeners an opportunity where if they want to get on the podcast and do an episode and share their story, that opportunity is there. So that's how we're going to evolve this podcast as we go forward. when we look at future podcasts, like I said, it's going to be a lot of storytelling, real life stories, even outside of hunting, what their everyday life looks like. So we kind of learned a little bit about my everyday life, but how did I get started hunting? I'm 36 now. When I was a kid, bow hunting really wasn't a thing. It was just mainly for the hardcore people. And if you've followed it over the years, how bow hunting has evolved into the primary season for hunters, and for a lot of good reasons. But when I got started hunting, I don't think I knew anything about bow hunting. I don't even know if I knew it was a thing. Maybe I watched the movie Robin Hood and thought that was about as far as it went for bow hunting or shooting a bow. But when I got started hunting, it was primarily before I was even old enough to hunt. In Iowa, party hunting is still kind of a thing, especially during shotgun season. It was way bigger when I was a kid. Before I was even old enough to hunt, I would just beg my dad to ride in the back of the truck while they're out there doing their pushes and stuff like that. It's not the most ethical way of hunting. It's legal, so what do you say about it? But that's kind of how I got started with my passion. I just love seeing big deer. And even when I couldn't go back in the day when you used to be able to get away with CB radios, I would just sit in the house and listen to them communicate through these radios and just get so excited. Then the older I got, the more I got to spend time in the vehicles, just kind of seeing what's going on. And I think in Iowa, 13 or 14, you can start hunting. So I got to start joining the party hunts. And of course, being the young kid, you're doing a lot of pushes primarily, doing all the walking, pushing the deer to everybody else. But it was still a lot of fun. And looking back at it, it's not so much about the hunt, it's about the camaraderie of those party hunts. Just being around people that maybe you only get to see once a year, all that good stuff. And it was definitely a lot of fun. And I'm not against it by any means. I think it'd still be kind of fun to do. But I think there's just more ethical ways of hunting in terms of presenting yourself with a challenge, putting the effort into it and whatnot, but nothing against party hunting. And looking back, if you listen to episodes going forward, we're definitely going to share some embarrassing stories. I want each listener to come on and kind of share at least one or two embarrassing stories. Everybody has them. And I mentioned party hunting, a lot of walking, but I remember one time when we got put on stand, and it was me and my brother. We were probably 14 or 15 at the time, and we were on each side of a driveway. It was the last day, it was cold, rainy, and we just wanted to shoot a couple of does and fill our tags. Well, when you're a young buck and you're on stand and you're cold, what do? You huddle down. And with all the older guys doing the pushing, it was kind of taking a while. And to this day, I don't know if it's true, but we were huddled down, and I think we fell asleep. And from what they told us, me and my brother were on each side of the driveway, huddled down, trying to stay warm. I think we fell asleep. From what they told us, the deer ran right through that driveway while we were huddled down. I don't know if that's true or not, but it'd be pretty funny if it was. But you're 14, it's freezing out there, you're just trying to stay warm. But if that's true, that's pretty embarrassing because I don't think we were really killers at that point. So we shotgun hunted for another 10 years, probably until I was 27, 30, somewhere in there. But once I got to 16 or 17, I remember the old man came home with this bow. I still remember it. It was a Matthews Featherlight, I believe. And I had no idea about bows. But first year, we made some tree stands out of angle iron, just some aluminum angle iron, bolted together, threw some plywood on. The old man threw us in the skid loader. We had the lag bolts, some straps, and what we did is he lifted us up. Me and my brother held that tree stand on, threw a strap around it, threw a couple lag bolts in it, and we set up some tree stands were basically just two vertical 1x4s with horizontal 1x4s every 16 inches or so. And that was the ladder. So this is how we got started in bow hunting. I don't know if the old man was just trying to get us out of his hair or what, but we set up these 3 tree stands. And I don't know if we had a food plot at that time or if we were just starting food plots, but he just kind of turned us loose and we kind of figured out how to bow hunt. Didn't really have anybody to teach us how to bow hunt because my dad didn't bow hunt, but we just kind of learned the ways. And my brother, the passion for bow hunting really didn't stick with him, because I'm kind of obsessed with it right now. But that's how I got started bow hunting. I don't know, I was probably 16 or something. Me and my brother bow hunting, we had one bow. And of course, we needed to get a second bow. So what's he come home with? this old Browning where the riser was probably so big I couldn't even fit both my hands around it. It was ginormous. And the limbs were straight as an arrow, no bend to them. And the cams on it were about the size of Gatorade bottle caps. No let off, no quiver. And of course, being the younger brother, that's what I got stuck with. Looking back now, I wish I wouldn't have been so quick to get rid of that bow because there's a lot of memories with it. But used that for a lot of years and eventually ended up getting a Matthews Adrenaline when I graduated high school and used that for 15 years. But it's really interesting to see how everybody started bow hunting. There's a lot of people out there that had somebody that kind of guided them, like their dad or whatnot. And while my dad was a hunter, the way of manning a party hunt for shotgun hunting was a lot different than bow hunting. We had to figure out a lot of stuff on our own, and especially myself since I stuck with it a little bit more than my brother. So a lot of things I've learned are self-taught in terms of bow hunting, and maybe that's why I'm not a very good hunter, but good enough anyways. But yeah, that's just kind of always stuck with me is the bow hunting. And as we kind of got out of the shotgun hunting, we kind of switched to late muzzleloader, which looking back now, at the time, I thought it was so stupid. But you're going late muzzleloader after first and second shotgun season, there's not going to be any big deer left. Boy, was I wrong. Some of the big deer obviously don't make it through shotgun season, but just the way you can set yourself up with food plots and whatnot, you can really guide those deer to a sanctuary to get by during shotgun season and have them on your property for late season, especially with food plots and whatnot. And over the years, they kind of learn what properties are safe, which ones aren't, and they get ahead of the game before shotgun season. But for sure, the three biggest deer I've killed are all late muzzleloader. Now, you might be thinking, well, why is this guy using a gun? You know, a lot of people are against it. I've always kind of had a passion for guns in terms of, how do I say this? Like load development, learning the ballistics and stuff like that, the science behind it. I do all my reloading. And I think that's kind of where part of my passion for late muzzleloader comes from, that and just being able to spend all this time putting food in the ground from the summer before you finally get through late season and you're just sitting out there by yourself and you just see this giant herd of deer come to your food plot after all the months of work you've put into it. It's just kind of a rewarding experience. It's not necessarily about trying to kill the big deer. Late muzzleloader bow hunting, there's something about being out there in nature with the animals. They might know you're out there, they might not, but you almost feel one with nature and just seeing the natural deer activity. Whereas when you're doing a shotgun push, everything's just kind of blowing up in front of you and deer are sprinting. If I was a better hunter and expert bow hunter, maybe I would focus on that and bow hunt over food plots late season. Well, like I said, where I hunt, there's no way you're sneaking up anywhere close to the timber in the fall, let alone the winter. That's kind of primarily why I focus on late muzzleloader. Am I tough enough to stand out there in a tree stand when it's 0 degrees and 20-mile-an-hour wind? I could probably survive, but why wouldn't I rather sit in an enclosed blind out of the wind? But either way, to each their own. Everybody has their own way of hunting. I'm bow hunting late muzzleloader. It's what I love to do. And I'm not too concerned what people say about it. It's what I love to do, and it's not about killing deer. It's about the challenge of setting your eyes on a specific target deer. It's about being out there with nature and all that stuff. So it's a lot more about just the harvest. It's about the experience and the journey to get to that harvest. So that's a little bit about my hunting background. Like I said, average hunter at best. Love doing it. Will I ever kill a 200-inch deer? Probably not. Will I ever kill a booner? Maybe not. I would have to be pretty lucky because I don't know if I've ever seen one on foot. But now I suppose it's time to do some storytelling. One thing I want to ask all the guests that join this podcast, on my eyes, everybody has a different way of how they got started hunting. I shared mine. But I'm assuming most hunters probably have one or two stories where they can look back now, they'll never forget. And it's just kind of that life-altering hunt where as soon as it happened, you're hooked. If you go out and hunt and you don't see anything when you first start hunting, maybe you're not going to get that hooked on it. But once you have a hunt that just blows you away and just brings all the adrenaline from there you're hooked. The one hunt that really changed me into a pure bow hunter is here in Iowa. Sometimes you get snow a little bit earlier, and I can't remember if it was November, December, end of November. I remember being in high school, we were getting snow, and talking to my teacher like, man, I hope we get out early. I want to go hunt. For whatever reason, I wanted to go sit in the snow, and we did get out early. And by the time we got home, there was probably 4 or 5 inches on the ground. And for whatever reason, my parents weren't home, and I wasn't old enough to drive. There might have been a spare vehicle at the farm, but didn't want to get stuck. Thought about taking the four-wheeler. It's snowing like crazy. So what I do is I get in this newer tractor we just got on the farm, 4760 John Deere, put my bow in there, and I drive that around the section to hunt the river bottom. And for whatever reason, I distinctly remember, and this was 20 years ago, I distinctly remember getting out to the stand and seeing fresh deer tracks. Like, oh boy, I'm not going to see anything. I spooked them. I sat out there for an hour, and I can just still see it in my eyes when I turn around, and there's single file line of about 25 deer walking right to me. And I think right there is kind of where I got hooked, because they all walked by me one by one. And I don't even think I was smart enough to play the wind back then. Like I said, I was self-taught. I don't think I started playing the wind until 10 years into bow hunting, but they all walked right by me. And there's this shooter buck, probably the biggest buck I'd ever seen at that time. Of course, he was last in this single file line, and everything walked by me to the cut bean field, and he kind of stopped behind me, like he hadn't made it past me yet. And he just stood there for 15 minutes, and he ended up laying down by a down brush pile. And I'm sure it was probably getting close to dark or whatnot. And I remember staring at him for an hour or whatever it was back then. And it's getting dark, and I was probably a little bit of a baby back then, wanted to get out of the stand before it got dark out. Like, okay, what am I going to do? And mind you, like I said, this is the biggest deer I'd ever seen at that time. And so he's 30 yards away. I'm like, okay, I'm going to shoot at him laying down. I'm probably 15 or 16 at the time. So I get up, pull back, still doesn't know I'm there. And of course, being the idiot I was, I missed him. Shot high, hit the brush pile, scared away. But just being out there and being so close to the biggest deer I'd ever seen at the time, he not knowing I was there when I was 15 or 16, just one of the coolest things that I'd ever experienced at the time. And like I said, that was 20 years ago, and I have a very vivid memory of that hunt. So that's what I want to bring to our listeners. I can share my stories all day long, but there's a lot of people out there that have stories that haven't been heard. Whereas if I were to just bring on so-called famous hunters, they're just going to share the same stories that they've done on several different podcasts before. So I guarantee you most of the stories we bring on, they're going to be stories you haven't heard before. So should be pretty cool. Looking at my biggest deer, that one was killed late muzzleloader, and that was when we were still kind of doing pushes. It wasn't necessarily like a hardcore deer drive. Me and my brother would get on stand. People would kind of mill around the section just to get the deer moving. And I didn't have any idea this deer was this big at the time. It was a 165-inch 10-pointer, nothing too impressive by most people's standards. But I remember 50 or 60 deer, single file, running towards me. And you have a split second to make a decision on, was this deer big enough or not? A lot of deer you think are big enough, go grab it. Shit, why'd I shoot this? I remember seeing him from the side. He didn't look that big. I don't know if I thought he was. Now that I think of it, I'm like, okay, he's a 10-pointer. I'm going to shoot him. And 10-pointers were pretty rare up there at that time. So he runs by me, and I shoot, and I could tell I hit him. And I go up there to grab him, and I'm like, what the hell? He only had one antler. Here I'm beating myself up. Why did I shoot this deer with one antler? It just didn't make any sense. Did I shoot the wrong deer? What's going on here? And I go to grab him and pick him up to see what the one antler looks like, and it popped off. Got to thinking, okay, maybe the other one popped off. Sure enough, walked around, there's snow on the ground, ended up finding it. He scored 165-inch. He's a solid deer. But I noticed that I shot him in the neck, which was pretty unusual. I'm an ace when it comes to shooting deer with a scope, running, standing, whatever. Not the greatest with the bow, average, but I don't miss when it comes to anything with a scope. And they could be running at full sprint. I'll hit them first time every time. So I was kind of surprised I hit him in the neck and didn't think much of it. but we still had some tags left at the end of the season, and we had deer that were living on the farm, and there's a big old doe out there 100 yards away, middle of the day. Pull up my muzzleloader as a Thompson Center Triumph, load it, 100 yards, chip shot, miss. What is going on here? Dumb deer. Loaded it 2 more times, shot, missed twice. She's living on the farm, she was used to noises. Missed her 3 times total. Okay, I better go take this gun back to the range and see what's going on here. And if you've ever shot a muzzleloader at the range, it's a pain in the butt because you gotta clean it, load it, just so time consuming. I shot probably 15 times, cleaning between, trying to get it to group. I knew this gun was pretty accurate. I can get 3 shots within an inch and a half, but I couldn't get it to pattern. Wondering what the hell's going on here. 15 shots in, I realized my scope was loose. Now, it wasn't the scope in the base as loose as, you get a gun, you put a base plate on top of the barrel, little Picatinny rail or what have you, and you put your scope rings on top of that. Well, as the base going into the scope, that came loose, and if I wouldn't have found that, can't imagine how many other deer I would have missed. But there's always going to be misses and whatnot. It happens pretty fast, split decision, but I knew something wasn't up, wasn't right. Doesn't always go your way in hunting. That's why they call it hunting and not killing, right? So that was kind of embarrassing. When I started going to college, I met a good friend of mine, Lance Porter. He'll be on a couple episodes from now. And I didn't know anything about hunting the wind or whatnot, but a few years after being friends with him, he finally took me down south to hunt, and that was probably one of the best hunts I've ever been on. Was the best day of hunting, bar none. We went out, and I'd never really seen any big deer in my life until then, and I mean big. The 165-inch deer I shot was the biggest I'd ever seen, and he talks me into coming down, and we're hunting neighbor's property. It's not wide open, shoot whatever you want. We're gonna hunt management deer. But I remember that morning we went out, and there's probably a 165-inch 8-pointer that we were playing cat and mouse with. We had him within 100 yards, and that thing was giant. That was by far the biggest deer I'd ever seen, just flat out. Frame size, it was huge. Giant G2s. Wow, I'll never see a deer like that again. And didn't end up working out. They get big for a reason. But we go out to the same farm later that night, and this was, I believe, as Thanksgiving weekend or the weekend before, which is one of my favorite weekends to hunt. But yeah, we saw that giant 8-pointer the morning before. And then one thing I've noticed about Thanksgiving time frame weekend, you might be sitting out there for several hours and not see anything. Then all of a sudden you look up, you kind of get complacent. Like, I'm not going to see anything. You look up and there's a big deer on the food plot. And that's happened so many times, and no different for this hunt. We were watching a bean field, and this giant, gnarly, non-typical walks out. And I was just in shock. Like, wow, this thing is huge. And I still give Lance shit to this day because we're hunting a landowner, out-of-state landowner's land. He let us hunt for management deer. And Lance sends a picture of this deer to the landowner. And the landowner said, "I've never seen that deer before. Go ahead and shoot him." And Lance claims he didn't think the deer was old enough, but the deer ended up walking off. We didn't try calling him in. We could have called him in, no problem. Thanksgiving weekend by himself, easy money. The deer walks away, disappears for life. And another deer comes out, and it was just this old ass, beat up 8-pointer with a broken main beam, drop tine, eye missing. He came out. We knew he's old. Lance called, came right in. And I distinctly remember the deer, we were facing north, for example, and he kind of came in and he was facing east, and his right eye was blind, like it got stabbed by an antler or something. So his chip shot, there's no way he's going to see me pull back. But the way it was, I basically had to get down on my knees on the base of the tree stand and pull back and let go, and ended up shooting him and finding him. Just a piece of crap, 8-pointer drop tine. Pretty fortunate to harvest one that hunt, but all I could think about was that big one Lance wouldn't let me shoot. And we ended up going back to that property to shed hunt. We didn't care if we shed hunt as long as we gave all the antlers back. And we found both antlers to that deer that Lance wouldn't let me shoot, and he was a pig. I think he ended up, we were estimating he would have scored 178. Just gnarly, whatnot. And if I make a video, I might drop a picture of the antlers here. just so you can see what he won't let me shoot. But I wish I would have hid those antlers and had them as a story piece for the rest of my life, because man, that I will never not give Lance crap for not letting me shoot that deer. To this day, it's probably the biggest deer I had an opportunity to kill, and it just didn't work out. But it's all for the stories, man. And you know, if I would have ended up shooting that deer, it'd probably be on my wall now, or it would be, and it wouldn't get talked about near as much as we talk about it now. So it's kind of fun to talk about. I won't make this episode last too long because it's been going better than I thought recording by myself. But man, it just kind of sucks. It's a lot better interviewing people than it is just rolling solo. But some of the most embarrassing stories, we'll kind of finish with this. Some of them, I'll try thinking of two embarrassing stories. One is back when I was in high school, I believe. It would have been high school. And, you know, I had this Browning, no quiver and whatnot. We had a four-wheeler. That's what I would drive out to the tree stand. But this old Browning bow, no quivers. And I'd go sit at the same tree stand every time. I remember not seeing any deer this hunt, but just the way I was positioned at the edge of the timber, I could see there's deer out in the field. That, and I was kind of a chicken at the times. Getting closer to dark, still a little light out, but I want to go see what these deer are. And maybe I was using that as an excuse to get out of the tree stand early before it got dark, but walk out to my four-wheeler without being seen. These deer are 400 yards away. And I don't know, the old man just didn't want to buy us binoculars at that point because we were still in high school. Didn't really need them. They're nice to have, but you don't need them. And being pretty curious, I wanted to go see what these deer are. I just love seeing big deer. So what do you think I do as a 15 or 16-year-old kid? I get back to my four-wheeler. Instead of just trying to sneak on the deer and see what they are, I'm just going to hop on this four-wheeler, haul oats across this cut bean field, get as close to them as I can, see what they are. So I did that, get on the four-wheeler, start up, just hauling oats across this bean field. I ended up getting pretty close to them before they kind of ran in the timber. Looking back now, it sounds pretty dumb. Sounds really dumb. But I remember just kind of catching my breath after chasing them down and like, what the hell? Where are my arrows at? Like I said, I didn't have a quiver. So I'd always carry my bow and my 6 arrows in my hand, then I'd just kind of tuck them behind my seat in my tree stand. I know I walked out of the tree stand with them. I must have set them on the rack of the four-wheeler as I was chasing these deer across the cut bean field, and apparently lost all my arrows. And it was probably early season because I remember my dad kept asking me, like, why aren't you going bow hunting? Why aren't you going bow hunting? Oh, I just don't feel like it. He didn't know that I lost all the arrows that he bought for me. So that's one knock. Two knocks is these arrows with fixed broadheads are laying out in the middle of the field where you still got to run equipment across. You might get a flat tire. So it was pretty embarrassing. I had to forego the rest of the bow season because I was too scared to tell him that I lost a bunch of arrows and broadheads out in the middle of the field. Now, embarrassing story number 2. So shooting some arrows around the farm. For whatever reason, when the old man leaves the farm, especially when we were younger, some stupid shit happened. But I remember my older and younger brother were shooting the bow, and they were just kind of like shooting the arrow up in the air, letting it go up 50 yards, barely pulling it back. Like, you guys are pussies. So I grabbed the bow, I pull that baby all the way back, shoot it up, and I remember once it got up so far you could barely see it, all I hear is footsteps running full speed across the gravel. They're running for cover because they lost sight of the arrow and they didn't know where it was going to come down. But I remember as soon as I lost sight of the arrow and heard there's footsteps, I started laughing so hard because I didn't give a shit at the time. So we ended up losing that arrow. Like, what the hell's going on? Where'd it go? I can't remember if it was that day or the day after. We ended up finding the arrow in the top of a granary. So a granary is just an old wooden building with tin on the outside. You store grain in there. And this arrow had like clipped the backside of this granary all the way down to the fletchings. If it would have gone another foot further, it would have been right through the windshield of the Suburban. But we were too embarrassed or scared to tell the old man. That arrow stuck in the top of that granary for probably a year or two. And it was just kind of the root of some funny stories. Like, It's kind of an inside joke. Who put that arrow up there? Old man never knew about it. And I think some grain probably got spoiled because it's in the roof above some stored grain. But finally he ended up finding it. He's like, who the fuck put that up there? And he's like, you idiots or whatnot. We finally got it down, but it was up there for a couple of years. And looking back, thinking like, God, I'm an idiot for doing that. But it's so funny looking back now, 15 years later, and how you can remember stuff like that so vividly. Another funny story about shooting bows on the farm, back when my brother used to shoot a little bit more. For whatever reason, he thought it was a good idea to place the block kind of almost facing the cattle lot. There was a cement wall behind the block, so he thought he was safe. And he's shooting. Well, he didn't know what happened. If you miss a target, you're fine. But instead of missing completely and hitting the cement wall, it hit the top of the target and just like bounced off. So it bounced and came back up right in the ass of a fat steer. So you just look, your eyes get this big. What the hell? Did that just happen? So I distinctly remember him out there with his Leathermans trying to grab this arrow out of this 1,500-pound steer, trying to pull it out. He's chasing it in the middle of the feedlot with a couple hundred other head of cattle, and I can't remember if it ended up breaking off or whatnot, but we had to peel him off, run him through the chute, and open up the side of the gate and peel out the last 4 inches of that arrow. Luckily, it didn't have a broad head in it, but looking back, you're like, man, how can we do such stupid stuff? But tell you what, those are the best stories. Those are the stories that you'll never forget. And that's what I want to bring to our listeners. Good stories, bad stories, embarrassing, everybody has them all. So as we start interviewing these random hunters that are soon to be part of the Hunter's Legacy friends and family, we want those stories. So if you got good stories, bad stories, we'd love to hear them. We'd love to hopefully have you on as a guest sometime. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen in to the first episode. I promise this is going to be the only episode you're going to have to listen to me talk solo. I don't like it. I only have so many stories to tell. I'd rather bring people on here to share stories that are a little bit better than the ones I have for you. But I'm going to do my best to put all these recordings on YouTube. I'm going to try to do some clips to Facebook, do some posts, blog posts with all these episodes so we can get it out to as many people as possible. Once I get the YouTube channel, Instagram, Facebook, and these podcast episodes launched, I'd appreciate it if you'd go subscribe in any way you can. The more followers we get, the more people that are going to provide feedback for the podcast, how to make it better, more opportunities to bring some guests on. I think it's going to be a good time. It's going to be a good time. And you might have to be patient with me as I get up and rolling, because I have to learn how to edit podcasts, be a little more efficient with my time. Like I said, I work full time, in the middle, balls deep in starting a new hunting app and trying to do this podcast and stuff like that, plus all other responsibilities that come with life, house projects, helping out on the farm when I can, health and fitness. So hopefully we can keep on a good schedule, getting these out in a timely manner. It's March 30th as I'm recording this episode. Plan on hopefully getting this out tomorrow. I have 3 other episodes recorded, so we're good for another month. But we're going to line some people up, good people. We want good opinions, bad opinions, your average hunters, people you haven't heard of. Hopefully this kind of carries on. We have a good time with it. And you're more than welcome to reach out on Facebook, whether that's my personal Facebook or a Hunter's Legacy Facebook. And if you want to be a part of the podcast in any way, shape, or form, reach out and we'll kind of go from there. I greatly appreciate you making it through the episode of me chatting about myself for an hour, 45 minutes, whatever. It sucks. It's not my forte. I don't like talking. I love listening to people, but I appreciate you making it this far, and hopefully we bring some bangers to you here in the future. And like I said, this is going to be a really unique podcast, and we're excited to have you guys along for the ride. Until next episode, stay calm and shoot straight. Thanks again for joining us on another episode of A Hunter's Legacy. Remember, hunting isn't just about the harvest. It's about the journey and the legacy we all leave behind. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with all the other hunters in your life. And if you have a story to tell, we'd love to hear it, because every hunter has a legacy worth sharing.